All right, today we're going to talk about better results with user testing and really the what, when, where, and how and why. And what I really want to get deeper into today are the different types of testing and when you can be using them throughout the process. And I do talk a little bit fast, plus the last time I gave this session I had an hour, so I'm going to go a little faster today. But if I need to slow down and you have questions, feel free to ask. So specifically, we're going to talk about why we should care about those darn users, signs of when you should test because you can't test all the time, setting expectations up with clients, tools that you can be using along the way, lessons that we've learned as an organization, and resources. I have a Google Doc that I'll give a link to at the end that I put all the tools. I'm showing you a bunch more, their prices, where you can find them, the good things and the bad things about them, as well as articles and books that I've either read or I found along the way in my own research. These will also be up in SlideShare. The slides are already up there at Winter-Lynn, so if you want to download them as well, they'll be up there. So my name is Lynn Winter. I work at Gorton Studios. We are a 7-person boutique web agency up in Minneapolis, and we've been building websites since 2001, and they've been building Drupal websites since 2004, and I came there about 6 years ago. I manage all the projects, both talk to potential clients in the sales portion, and then manage all the details throughout the way. And my job is really to make sure that we're making the right choices for the client. I'm there to represent internally and externally the client and what their needs are. Before that, I managed projects at a PBS station, so I've been project managing for like 14 years, so that's exciting to me and probably makes some people ill out there that don't like to do that. So why care about our users? Well, hopefully we all know that we need our users, right? We can build something, we can spend a bunch of time on something, put it up there, it's really beautiful, it's great, but we're not putting that up there for ourselves. We need our users to provide value, right? They need to buy something, they need to donate money, they need to read and educate, they need to share. We need them to do something, so without them, we're making things in a vacuum. But that's nice, right? User testing takes a lot of time and money, right? Well, it doesn't have to. But it doesn't mean you can test everything. And you might be working on a small project, you might be working on an enterprise site. It doesn't matter. You can't spend the entire time testing every little thing. You'll never get anything launched and pushed live. So there's just a couple times that I'd like to highlight as things that I think are really a sign that maybe you should be doing a little bit of user testing along the way. One would be if you're doing a really complex functionality or something you've never built before. We're currently working on a project that has a license management system in the background. We've never built a license management system. We need to do a little bit of testing to make sure that all the functionality is there because there's not the license management system over there that we can go look at and compare things to. You might be really unsure about who your users are. You're not going to be able to get really specific demographics from your analytics. Maybe you haven't really reached out to them. Maybe you're trying to reach someone new. User testing is a way to learn more about them. You might have accessibility requirements that are higher than usual. Maybe as a client, you have a user that has needs like that, or maybe as a developer, you've never really had to pay close attention to that, and testing to make sure you've got it right is great. If you're a company or a product that has never existed before, you don't have analytics to look back to, you don't have a product out there that's the same as yours, so you can't compare. You're really starting afresh, so you can kind of test along the way to see if you're on the right track. Another one, if you have users that need to buy into decisions, we work a couple different nonprofit organizations. We actually almost work all with nonprofits and government and those kind of folks, and a lot of them are member organizations, and they can't just go and change a bunch of things and make sure their members stay there and pay. So they need to really bring them in and along the way. Conversion rate, right? If your donations are half of what supports your organization, you're going to need to make sure that works well. So that's another great time to test. We sometimes, as a developer, have used it to back up our expertise. Maybe we're starting a new relationship with the client and they're not quite on board with what we're thinking. It's a great way to back them up. And it's also a great way for us to be like, okay, are we sure about this? You know, we're not always right. Doing some sort of testing might help with that. If you have a task-driven website, I was just in the room a little while ago where someone was showing the transit system for Iowa. That's a great example of really specific tasks. So it's really easy to do user testing because someone needs to buy tickets, someone needs to get on their route. There are specific tasks that come out that need to be really efficient for people to do. And then finally, maneuvering through a political environment. We got a client right now out of Missouri, the Department of Conservation, where they're allowed, as their group, to go and make all these changes to the website. The problem is the people on top that don't really want to pay attention right now, they want to know, they want to check in every 6 months. So we've been doing a lot of testing just to support the decisions we've made along the way. So those are kind of some times to do some testing. And before you just kind of jump in and say, okay, we're going to test, we're going to go do this, we're going to do that. Well, you don't really know why. Why should you use that kind of test, or why should you do that? So what I like to do is kind of get everybody on the same page and make sure that we're talking about what we're trying to achieve, and make sure we all match up. And so these are questions that we talk internally about as well as with clients to make sure that we're providing some value in this user testing. The first one is just make sure everyone's clear about what the goal is. Are you doing this just to provide support for your decisions? Are you doing this to make changes? How is it going to affect the entire process? What are the goals and value you're bringing to it? And then kind of the parameters, right? Budget, scope, and timeline. How long can this shift your project? Can you add 3 weeks, 4 weeks to the timeline? Can you add no time to the timeline? How much can you put in? $1,000? Can you put in 200? Can it be 10,000? Setting those parameters up so everyone knows where you're heading. And who will be working with these users, right? Am I going to be working with them one-on-one? Is the client going to be finding these users and working them and walking through a different test? You're going to do it together. Who's going to find them, right? If you have a member organization, that's easy, right? You're going to have a whole list of people, but if you don't, where are you going to find them? Are you going to go through a remote online testing service? Is that okay? Do they not need to know anything about your product or your website? Where will the testing take place? It's a great time to talk about if you're going to do remote testing, if you're going to do on-site testing, if you're going to need to fly somewhere because client and developer are in different locations. And who's going to interpret the results? Once you get all this feedback, who's going to take that information and decide what it means? So let's jump into some tools and tests that are available. And I'm going to kind of run this through the different phases of a project, and this is just how I divide it up and not necessarily how every one of our projects is divided up or in this order. But we're going to walk through first the initial discovery phase, navigation. Content, I'm actually not going to talk about today, but I can talk to someone about that if you want to. I had to shorten the session up a little bit. Layout and design, and then also working prototype, live site. So in initial discovery, there's 3 kind of tests that I recommend at this point that might be a good fit for what you're doing. That's a usability test, a user survey, and user interviews. A usability test is basically where you give tasks to someone and they have a product and they go through and try to complete the task and you get to observe what they're doing. This is great to use when you're starting a project, right? Right from the start, you can make the most impact and change, and if you can get that feedback right off the bat, you can impact the rest of the project. So if you're doing a full redesign, it's a great time to do some sort of usability testing. If you want to pinpoint why something's not working and you don't really know, so you have a section or a page or a task that's just not sure why it doesn't work. Or your life and your success really depends on how you are in your competitor field, right? Maybe your competitor is doing all these things. Test their website. See how they're doing. Why is it working so well? So the pros of this is you really only need a few people. The guideline is really 5 people. Just need 5 people to do these tests and get information. The nice thing is you can do it together, right? You're observing someone either in a lab or in a room or remotely. You can do that together, client and developer. That gets everybody building that relationship together, as well as allows the client to kind of see where there are some problems with their website. You're also, if you're user remote, you can talk to a lot of people. Typically you pay by the user, so you can get more feedback and you can divide it up in different demographics, and so you can get different kinds of feedback about different things. The bummer is it really does take a long time testing. If you have to recruit people, set up a day where everyone can come in, and then you're going to analyze the results and determine what happens next, it is a longer timeline. If you do it in a usability lab, which we have done, it's really expensive. It's $15,000, $25,000 if you have like a professional lab setting. So it can get really expensive, but you don't have to do it in a lab. Also, it extends the timeline from the start. It's really hard for someone to call me and say, okay, I want a website in 2 months, 3 months, and then you say, well, that's great. Let's delay the project for 2 more months because we want to do some usability testing. So it's a tricky conversation to have right from the start. So the details really are, you're going to need up to 5 users. You're going to have some tasks. You got to focus on a couple areas on your site and do the test. It can take 3 to 8 weeks depending on how many people and how organized it needs to be and who's all in the room. And the hard cost, as I mentioned, the usability lab testing is really the expensive part. Also, if you need to recruit people and pay someone to do that, that can be like $2,000. But online services are $40 to $70 a user. And there's a bunch of them. We've only done lab setting at this point, and we haven't used these online tools, but user testing is a very popular one. But my feeling is, bottom line is, observation is so important, and do it in person. Just grab a couple people. It doesn't have to be complicated. Get a conference room. Have them walk through some tasks that are really bewildering or some areas you really want to make some improvement on. And that's it. It doesn't have to cost you $20,000. The next option is a user survey, and I'm sure a lot of people in the room have done this. You know, get a MailChimp, put up a survey, great. So really you're going to come up with a list of questions, and you're going to ask your users. This is a great one to get those member-based organizations or the constituents, if it's a government website, to get them on board with this change and decisions and help them feel part of it, as well as give you some ideas that you might not know about. And that's kind of the second point, too, is that you might have ideas of how you want to change, but you don't have all the answers. So you can ask them, what would you change? What's not working for you? And that can help you fill out a requirements document. Finally, that point about don't know who your demographics is, who are these users? That's a great time to ask the survey. Who are you? If it's important to know their income or it's important to know their education level or something to your website, then ask them those questions in that area. The pros are super fast and easy. Really quick to get up there. You can ask a lot of people. Hundreds of people can answer this in like 2-3 days. And if you have people, typically on a survey you have, yes, no, ABC, closed answers questions. You also have some open answer questions where they can write some information. That's great. So people that do a really good job at that, pick them up, bring them forward to the next user testing you want to do. But that's also the bummer, because those open questions with the open answers, if you have 1 or 2 times 200, you could be looking at 400 different answers. So that's going to take a lot of time. Also, the answer accuracy might be a little suspect. We had a client recently that we did a survey with, and we're like, all right, we know what the goal is, we're going to send it out, and they're like, okay, we'll send it out to our newsletter list. I'm like, great, you just revamped your newsletter in the last year, got a great list, send it out. Turns out they didn't revamp the list. We had hundreds of people that hadn't been on the website in like 3 years. So that wasn't really helpful. Plus, when people answer surveys, they want to sound better and feel better. So they sometimes don't really answer it accurately. So the nice thing is, though, it can cost nothing, right? You're going to post up a survey, get it online, takes a couple days, so the timeline's pretty short, and you can do a lot of things with like MailChimp or a couple different tools for little to no money. Another option is the Qualaroo, which is a great little tool that you can put on your live site too, that pops up and it has like 1 or 2 questions, and you can tell it to go in different sections and ask questions. So that's something you can do ongoing testing also when you're live. So my bottom line with this is it costs almost nothing. Do it if you have a good goal of what you want to get out of it, so you write really good questions and you have a really good group of people you're sending it to. I find that people want to just do surveys to do surveys, and we just go through the motion at this point. So make sure that you know what you're trying to get out of it. All right, the last one for initial discovery is user interviews, and that's kind of not a thing. Usually it's called stakeholder interviews and contextual inquiry, and basically those kind of terms are, you talk to internal people and you talk to external people. You kind of go one-on-one, get in their environment, and ask them how they're using the site and observe them. And I just kind of lumped it together because internal and external are both important. So this is a great one to do when you have that task-driven website. There's very specific questions. You can watch someone. Are they using the bus website? How are they going to buy tickets? How are they, is it fulfilling their needs? If you have internal stakeholders that are high priority, maybe they're high priority because there's a political situation going on, or maybe there's a high priority because you're building a huge functionality that impacts their business, and they're going to be using that every single day. If you know nothing about the topic, right? We are building a website right now about genomics. I don't know if everyone's familiar with that. I have a chemistry degree and I know nothing about it. So, and it's kind of in the field, but if we don't know anything about it, go ask more questions. We need to make sure that we're building the right thing for them. Also, even if none of those apply, but you have an event that you can piggyback on, that's also a great time. So maybe the state fair, if somebody has a booth, or there's a conference, or they're bringing together their board members or something where it's already set up and all it is going to take your time to show up and talk to people and leave. So the pros of it is that you get to step outside your shoes, right? As a development team and you build websites all the time, you know how it's right, you know how it's going, but you really literally get out of your environment and start seeing things from their perspective. It's an opportunity to build that relationship with the client even more for all those stakeholder interviews internally. And you're also going to see how somebody's cheating the system. If you watch them use a tool in their environment, you're going to start seeing that, oh, you thought they would go here, here, and here, but instead, that doesn't work for them at all, and they're going to go over here, and they have this little quick save over here, and you're like, oh, I didn't know all those things were not working for people. So that's helpful. The bummer is that it's going to take you more time to travel to multiple locations. You're going to have a limited perspective potentially, so you need to take it with a grain of salt. This one person riding the bus doesn't speak for everybody. And internal stakeholders sometimes can take over the process. So you need to set a clear expectation from the beginning with anybody about how their feedback is going to impact the project, and just make it, they're clear about it, it'll go very smoothly. So this process, really, you're creating a list of questions for each unique user. The time really is taking, going around and talking to people, and then you're going to pull together some report to share with your full web team. The nice thing is it's super cheap, right? You probably have to get mileage paid for, and you might get hungry and want a snack somewhere along the way. So it's kind of my little joke for, it doesn't really cost much. It's just your time, which costs something, but you can do it. So my bottom line on this one is, if you have an event or a space to do this in, go do it. It's as simple as going to a college student union and sitting there and asking people how they use the bookstore, and if you're building a bookstore website. It's really easy. I mean, I know something that we've learned is that we try to make it more complicated. It has to be this and that, but just go talk to people. All right, let's move on to navigation. So there's two things we're going to cover with navigation, and it's card sorting and tree testing. Card sorting is really, you have a whole bunch of pieces of paper, or you do it online, and you have all these different pages, and you group them. There's open and closed. Closed is when you kind of set the boundaries of the navigation, so you already have your top level navigation, and people sort all the cards in them. Open is, it's a free-for-all. They get to label anything they want.
Can I interject for just a second? Has anybody in this room done a card sort?
I've used Assembla, and they have a tool in there that you can create items, and then it's actually kind of a nice interactive thing that people can use.
Yes.
Assembla, yeah.
So this is a great time when you're overhauling all your content on your website. Everything is out the door, right? So how are we going to reorganize this? Maybe you have some label concerns. You've decided to label something: resources, FAQ, and help. Where does somebody know? Which is the right spot? Also, if there's content in multiple places, you have the same piece of content showing up over and over in different places, it's time to figure out where it should live and not put it everywhere on the site. It's a totally affordable exercise. You need paper, scissors, and a pen, and you can cut out little boxes and do it. It's a really fun tool or exercise to do as a client and web team together, so people can start seeing where things can go. It's going to expose the weak points. There's places that something won't go, and people will put it in different places. So the activity will help you kind of find those weak points. The con is that it's not going to tell you your structure, right? Everyone's going to do it differently. Maybe some people will have the same thing, but it's not going to give you a sitemap. So you do need to analyze and then come up with that. It's about impossible with overwhelming data sets. We have a project that has over 20,000 nodes, and we can't do it, right? No one's going to sit and do that. So we took a subset, and still at this point, there was like 50, and people had a really hard time doing it. So you've got to narrow your focus in and figure out what the most important area to test and group. And specialized content is challenging if you have medical terms or something in the science field that No one's going to know what it is unless you're in that field. You got to make sure you find users that are in that area. This is a really quick thing to do. You can, I say 1.5 to 3 weeks, but you could literally do it in the afternoon in a meeting. And it's really cheap. They have online tools. We've used Optimal Sort ourselves, but there's a bunch of these out there that you can use. But I actually recommend not using those. We've learned that, and the slides are up there too. We've learned that that's great, so everybody put them in different places, or there's some overlap. That's really nice. Why did they do that? We can't ask anybody why. So we've decided going forward, we're not going to do it unless we sit with someone and do it, and we can hear them talk out loud of, I'm going to put this here, and I'm going to put this there, and I'm going to put this there. Because I'd rather talk to 5 people doing that than like get 100 people doing an online thing. So it's great, and it's also a task that we're going to try to start doing with some clients as well. So tree testing, this is kind of like after you have your site skeleton, really your site map laid out, you come up with a list of questions. I recommend about 10. You start to lose people, 15, 20, and they kind of give up on this test. But you ask them, like, give them a scenario, and they click on where they think they're going to find it, and then it exposes each level of navigation. So they'll click down, down, down. This is where I'll find it. And then you figure out if they're right or if most people are going to the same place. So this is really a great way to validate that structure. Maybe you did card sorting, maybe you didn't, but you have a site map and you're not sure, or you still have those label concerns, or the client maybe isn't really on board with it. You can do this. We had a client in a situation where we started the meeting and we're like, all right, we want a mega menu. And we said, why? And they're like, we want a mega menu. It needs to be on the top. I'm like, but you don't have mega. It's not a mega menu. It's just stuff on the top. It's a layout thing. And they're like, no, it needs to be a mega menu. Or not a mega menu, I'm sorry, a super nav. They kept going on a super nav, and we're like, okay, well, you know what a super nav is. And we just had a language barrier. We said, finally, after like 2 meetings, we just threw it out. We took away the layout, and so they could stop seeing things visually. We threw it into the system. We're done. We made a couple changes, and everybody was on the same page, and they understood it. And then we dealt with the design later, because that wasn't what we were discussing at that point. So the tool became really helpful for that. We also found out we were missing some things. So it helped everybody look through that to find out where things are at. So this tool is really great for iterations. You can put it up there. You can get your feedback from your users. We typically post something for 3 days. If someone hasn't taken a test by the 3rd day, they're not going to take it anyway. You get 3 days to do it. You make your changes in an afternoon. You post it again. Okay, now are all our questions successful? Did we achieve it? You didn't? There's a couple things that are a problem. Okay, post it again. And also, again, this is a whole visualization of seeing things without putting that design on it, without putting out the spacing and the layout. So we can just look at the structure, which is what we're doing at this point. You can't really test large pieces of content. You can only really do, as I mentioned, like 10-ish questions. So a really big navigation or 3 levels of navigation you can't do. Start with one area and then get more focused as you go along. The other thing you can't test is the impact of site search, linking, layout, design. Once this page has a layout and you've colored up your navigation and you've done a mega menu or whatever you're doing, are they going to find it? We don't know, right? So you can do some testing later on, or you can use your best guess. So we take about 2.5 to 3 weeks typically when we do it. If we only need a couple iterations, bigger sites that need multiple iterations, if we're still working through things, it can be up to 4 weeks. This doesn't mean it has to be going on by itself, and so any of these times necessarily doesn't mean here's your project timeline, 3 months plus 4 weeks. You can be doing things at the same time. Sometimes you can't and you need to wait, but it doesn't mean it's added on top of your project. For this, this is really a good online tool kind of thing. You could probably print these all out and have people point to where they go. That seems a little inefficient. So we've used TreeJack is really the one we've been using. And if a lot of these things have like a free month trial, so for $0 you can put it in there, do your test, and you're done. So if you have the budget to iterate and make changes, and you have good users out there that you already have contacted, why not? Go for it. All right, layout and design. So this is really, when you have wireframes on paper or design mock-ups that you want to be looking at and making questions. we've done both in this area, click testing, and we've done A/B testing. I'm going to save the A/B for the working prototype. But click testing is really a question, and you ask, where would you click? So if you were to do this on a live site, you'd be probably doing mouse tracking, right, or a heat map of where people are clicking, and you can do that. We've done things where we've done, a click or multi-click, right? Click, click, how do I get somewhere? And this is also a test we've done with online tools. The reason this is important is that if you click the right place first, you're going to have an 87% success rate. If you don't, you're in big trouble, and you have 46%. So sometimes we build websites. All websites are important, and everything people do on them is really important. But sometimes it's really important to how they're going to pay for their organization and the people to stay there. So sometimes this is really important to do. So when you have a new layout and structure, it might be a time to do it. If you have a question about your current site, does it make sense to you, and you're not sure why people are clicking where they are, this is another great time. And that conversion rate comes in here. That donation button, can you find it? Can you get to that video you need to learn about the organization? So the pros is that you're doing this on paper, right? It's so cheap to do it until you build it. Once you build it, it's going to cost a lot more money. You can get a lot of people online to do this test, and it's easy to analyze, right? There's a yes-no situation here. You can see it'll pull up some analytics of where everyone's clicked, gives you percentage, and these online tools are great and easy to do that. If you're doing a click test or a mouse tracking test on a live site, you get that no observer effect, right? They don't know you're watching, so you're actually going to see what they would do versus they know you're watching, and now I'm going to try really hard to click in the right place. So you get a little better results in that way. The downside is that you get no feedback, which is with a lot of these online tools, unless they're doing video recording, which they do with the usability test. You don't really know why they're clicking anywhere. Also, click test doesn't show eye movement. They might be looking all over your page before they actually click on something. So you're missing that information. And then, if you are on a live site, you can't ask them why, and you can't direct them, right? With a click test, when you're doing it before, then you ask them a question and tell them how to find something. On a live site, they're just clicking anywhere they want to find, so you don't know why they're doing it. Less control over what you're trying to find out. So in this situation, you probably already have a layout design, and you just need to get it up in the system and test. This is often something we just put up once and we don't iterate on unless there's a big problem. So the timeline isn't as long. And again, similar pricing, $0 to $200. We've used both Chalkmark and Verify. We've liked them both. So if this is something of interest to you, I'd give it a whirl. Typically, we've now kind of done enough user testing that we have a subscription with one of them, so we keep going back to Verify a lot more. But Chalkmark was great too.
Somebody use those tools here? So you bring us some brand new stuff today.
Woo! Yeah. Yes. So why not, right? If your click's really important, do it. It's cheap. It's quick. Make sure you just have a good reason to do it, right? Can't do all of this, so pick a focus. All right, so working prototype. How are we doing on time? Oh, we're doing good. So A/B testing. So I'm saying working prototype. That's kind of a loose word because it means something different for everybody that builds. That could be your live site because it's really always changing and growing and different. It could be an alpha phase or something pre-launch ready to go. But A/B testing is often used on live sites or in this area. We've also done it with designs when we had different design options, when we did something called style tiles, where basically you have different color choices and font choices, and we did a test with that to see which the member-based organization, which one they preferred. But basically you're comparing an A and a B. You have an A and B up there. Oftentimes, like on the live site, they're not much different. You're incrementally changing little pieces to see what impact that's going to make. So this goes back to your CRO, that darn conversion rate. It may or may not be important to you based on where you work. Also, if you have, you're worried about anything on the layout and the look and feel, and that can go all the way from the colors to the font, to the headers, to the spacing, to how the content is put together. I mean, you might test if you have one header and a super header, and then you have 10 lines of text. Well, what if you break that out in 2 paragraphs with 2 headers? Are people reading things and they're clicking through the next thing? Maybe you write the word donate. Maybe the next one you write the word support. Which one do they like? Maybe something's blue and something's green, and they have this worst green bedroom in their whole life, and everybody wants blue. That's what you really are with testing. So it's the small changes, and it's a good way to get a gut reaction, right? They're going to pick A or they're going to pick B. Got an answer. You know what they're heading towards. The problem is you have to build them both. So if it's not a small change and you're doing something bigger, that's a problem, or if it's a big development item. This is often an item considered after you've used your entire budget up and then some. So if it's already live, people kind of hit their limit on how much they're going to continue working the site or how much money they have to spend. And you don't, again, know why someone picks one or the other. So you're going to create both options. You're going to test, analyze, and iterate. This is really an iteration kind of tool. And maybe not iterate on the same minute small thing, but you're going to be kind of making changes to make some increase in some sort of analytics you've been tracking. And this will take a couple weeks and $0 to $300. We've used Verify. A lot of people use Google for this. Optimize is another good option. If you have a super focused, specific goal, give it a whirl. But make sure you know that it's endless if you want it to be. So set parameters around where you want to stop or where you've made your success point. So that's all the tools I was going to go through today. I want to kind of finish up talking about the things that we've learned along the way. First thing is there's no substitute for in-person. We've learned this the hard way. It's really tempting to do remote stuff because it's more affordable. Maybe our clients in another state. It's easy to gather users, but it's not right for every situation. If you don't have a clear purpose and goal, you're not going to get much value out of it. Just saying you want to do user testing and putting something up, and we've been, put crimes against this, but you got to make sure it's super clear and the client's on board with it. Leave the analysis up to the experts. We had a client once call us and say, we don't have any money, but we're going to do this user testing and we're going to change our navigation. Can you just guide us and spend a couple hours? And I wish we would have kind of taken on the role because they're really experts in what they do and we were experts in what we did. And they made some choices that we would kind of told them to head in a different direction. So analytics we haven't talked about hardly at all, but they're going to be the thing that guides you through the whole way to figure out what you should be testing, if there's been change, what questions you can come up with, who you should be reaching out to. Also, testing doesn't make decisions. I think a lot of clients think that you're going to test and then you're going to know what to do. And it doesn't. It's just going to give you information that you need to analyze. Pick something at the start. It is much easier to start when you are starting up a project to decide how much money and time you're going to set aside and what you're going to do from the beginning. You can change that, but it's really hard when you're in the middle to be like, oh, we got to need user testing. Can we just add 4 more weeks to the project? It's really frustrating there. So make some decisions about what you might want to test, set some time and budget aside, and then you can adjust as you go through. And most importantly, don't make it too complicated. We've done this, and that's really the lesson I've learned going forward is that you could do guerrilla testing as your friend. Just go talk to the other people in your room or in the next office or at the coffee shop or something. They all have voices. They're all users. See what they think about it. So like I mentioned, there's a Google Doc where it has all the different tools I talked about, how much tools I didn't talk about, and information about them, as well as articles and books and things to read more about. And then the slides are up on my SlideShare with Jerlyn, and it includes the content stuff from when I gave the session last. And then to close out, we're going to do a mood test. I don't know if everyone's ready. All right. I want you to tell me, do you feel happy? Are you frustrated? Or are you very angry? And we didn't add this on here, but you feel comatose from your lunch. I see a couple comatose. All right. Thank you for coming. Do you guys have any questions?
When you look at Google Analytics versus other kinds of tracking tools, do you find that there are some things that I think it's with Verify or there's some of the other ones that have extra value that maybe Google Analytics doesn't provide?
I think you're kind of looking for something different, right? So Verify is not an analytics tracking tool, but it will give you the stats and information from the test.
Okay.
So
I'm sorry, I meant for like if you're looking at Google Analytics versus some other kind of analytics tool. Does Google Analytics, is it a good system for general use?
Yeah, it really is, and I think the thing that we're learning a lot, especially in the nonprofit field, like in a couple of years ago, people just set it up, right, and then nobody did anything with it. And then like a year ago, people started searching things and trying to figure out what they can learn from it. And now everybody wants to set it up, and they should. So there is so much you can do with Google Analytics, and it's free versus like a mixed panel, or there's a billion different like paid subscription things. But you can do a lot with Google Analytics. You just need to learn and read more about it and set it up. And I think the biggest thing is to figure out, what you should be tracking. Your micro conversions, your macro conversions. Set up your goals, set up your little goals, and see what you're tracking, and then shift those out. But I think it does a good job.
If I could add on to that, I think Google Analytics has a really good user interface, and it's very easy for lay people to use, if you will. Whereas a more complex license subscription to Omniture or something like that is very difficult to set up. Or not difficult to set up, but it's very complex in it to set up, and it takes a lot of time and money to set it up and to utilize it accurately. So I think Google Analytics is a really good tool for basic analytic needs.
Sure. Also, I'd put a pitch in for Google Analytics Academy. If you search for that, it's an 8-hour course called Understanding Digital Analytics. It's fantastic, and will really set you up to understand what all those different figures mean.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say it's right for all of our clients because they have some serious goals surrounding conversions, and they need something that provides them more information and that can give them better dashboards and reports and things like that. But for the 95% of our clients, it's a really good fit.
Have you bridged this with making sites more web accessible in accordance to like W3C standards and that sort of thing? I mean, because this is really for the user audience base, but I would think that some of the things that would need to be done based on the research that comes out of that would be extremely also helpful with accessibility because you're actually testing individuals.
Unfortunately, we haven't done accessibility testing at all. It's not something that's come as a requirement. We do the base level of making sure things check out and validate, pre-launch tests and different things like that, and try to use smart decisions about colors and things along the way that we kind of do normally now, but we haven't done that. But if we had a situation where the audience had a disability or something that would require, we would for sure need to do usability test or accessibility testing because we wouldn't know. That's bottom line is we don't do that every day. So, but I'm sure it would be. But there are some things that come out of it, doing the right thing for accessibility that actually contradict what we all think is the right design and the layout and things like that. So it can be a challenge in mapping that together.
I was going to ask about, I was thinking about A/B testing, and there's kind of the site build out, right? But then sites are continuing on and we're improving and going. Do you do much as far as user testing to try and help guide how to make the site more successful and make, and target your development efforts where it's like, it looks like this is an area we could improve, or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Having that more drive the process rather than, hey, I think this is a good idea, let's test it. Oh, it's not a good idea. Hey, I think this is a good idea, let's test it. It's not a good idea.
Yeah, we do that. I would say because we work mostly with nonprofits, and maybe this is a wrong statement, but I typically find that we're not doing the typical, you don't do the A/B testing where you make those small changes and increments for a conversion, right? Because their conversion is about education and informing people and trying to get people even to donate, but there's different motivations that maybe like a commerce kind of needs are. So we spend more time trying to reach out to users in either like a survey or interviews and trying to get information from them at this point. It's a kind of a tricky thing because typically with those type of clients, they've come back to us. So we feel like we know them, we did this. And that's a little bit of us needing to get out of our mindset of like, maybe we don't know that. What did we not do right? And we always start by looking at the analytics and seeing where there are some problems and with the keyword searches and different things like that. But it's usually in a user question or usability testing kind of outreach back at that initial discovery phase. Even if we're not doing a full build and we're just doing that, kind of smaller level changes kind of thing, we would do something like that.
I'll give you another one.
No problem.
card sorting.
Mhm.
I've done several.
Cool.
And I am in total agreement with you on the fact that it's important to be in the room. I think there's a good activity that happens there. Is there a good way that you have that you use to explain what card sorting is to a client? Like, is there any key words? Because I find that it's kind of difficult. You know, I'll make them some cards and we'll sit down and we'll do the activity.
Mhm.
But they don't really know what they're getting into.
You've never had that problem.
And we just kind of, and they enjoy it.
Yeah.
But I don't really have a good way to.
You know, the people we've done it with, it's typically included a project manager from their side that's been more technical and that gets that process versus the client that maybe, you know, is a little more distant. So maybe that's why we haven't had that problem. I would wonder, though, if you explain it too much, it becomes a little too, like, this is exactly going to be the navigation and this is it. Like, I think, I would imagine there's probably a fine line of try, you know.
Trying to convey, like, what is that? Is it, just come and meet. And
It's okay.
we'll do this great little activity.
Yeah. Huh.
So,
No, I haven't. Sorry. Anything else?
Great session, then. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you guys are interested further in usability testing, I would strongly recommend reading by Steve Trugg.
Yes.
A common sense guide to usability testing. I read it a few years ago. I think he's just published his 3rd edition January this year. And it will help immensely.
It's on the list.
Very, very good read. And it's not dry, boring, worky.
No, it's quick.
Yeah, it's
Quick
very
read.
witty, it's very funny.
It's just that you don't make me think.
Yep.
Yeah, he tells a lot of good stories that are quite funny.
It's fun, yeah, it's very fun.
It's somewhat cruel.
Can you put your link slide back up?
Oh, yeah.
Two back, I think it was. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and then we did if you missed this, it's in the slides on the slide deck too. Cool. Well, thanks everybody for coming, and I'll be around all day if anyone has any questions. And for those playing cornhole, I'll see you there. I played twice in my life, but.